Today, more than 100 employees at the 3 major airports in the Washington area were arrested on charges that they gave false information on their applications to work in secure areas. Later, Attorney General John Ashcroft spoke to reporters about those arrests. Among those joining him at this news conference, John McGaugh, the Transportation Department's top security official. It's just over a half hour.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul McNulty, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. We are here today to announce a large-scale anti-terrorism airport security initiative. And I am honored by the presence of the United States Attorney General John Ashcroft. I'm also pleased to introduce a number of other law enforcement leaders who are with us today. First, the Honorable John McGaugh, who is the Undersecretary of Transportation for Security. In addition, we have with us today Warren Lewis, who is the District Director of the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, Van Harp, the Assistant Director in charge of the Washington Field Division of the FBI, John Clark, Acting United States Marshal for the Eastern District of Virginia, Alan Duty, the Special Agent in charge of the U.S. Customs Service, Baltimore, James Hughes, the Inspector General for the Social Security Administration, Kenneth Meade, the Inspector General of the Department of Transportation, Tom Huggins, Special Agent in charge, Washington Field Office of the Department of Justice, Office of Inspector General, Lieutenant Henry Dale, Special Agent in charge of the Criminal Investigation Bureau in Fairfax County of the Virginia State Police, and Leo Rossiter, Chief of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Police. And now it is my privilege and honor to introduce the Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon. An integral part of our mission to prevent terrorist attacks is the security of the nation's airports. Today, I am announcing the first results of an ongoing cooperative effort by law enforcement to ensure that those granted access to secure areas of our airports are worthy of the trust granted to them by the public. Just hours ago, federal officials completed the arrest of 94 employees at Dulles International Airport and Ronald Reagan International Airport on charges of widespread fraud in obtaining restricted access airport security badges. These individuals are charged with gaining access to secure areas of our airports by lying on security applications, using false or fictitious Social Security numbers, or committing various immigration frauds. 3 of those arrested are fugitives from justice on state charges. All are now in the custody of law enforcement officials. Today's arrests are the result of the unprecedented interagency, multi-jurisdictional cooperation among law enforcement that literally has come to define our effort to prevent terrorist attacks. When I say that, I mean that local and state authorities and individuals at every level of government have been cooperating to make our efforts more productive and to secure with greater certainty this nation against terrorist attacks. Late last year, Paul McNulty, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, formed a task force to investigate the integrity of the security clearance process at Dulles and Reagan National Airports. As part of this task force, officials from 11 agencies examined the employment records of over 20,000 airport employees. In a painstaking and labor-intensive effort, employment records for all individuals who held security identification display area badges, those individuals and their credentials and employment records were examined. The badges, which authorize access to secure areas of the airport, are obtained by employees on the basis of information they provide to airport officials. Members of the task force examined employment records to determine the truthfulness, and they conducted criminal history checks on employees. What this investigation uncovered should be a wake-up call for every airport in America. 68 individuals employed at Dulles and 26 individuals employed at Reagan National have been arrested on charges including falsifying security applications, Social Security fraud, and various immigration violations. If convicted, many of these defendants face maximum penalties that range from 2 to 10 years in prison, plus up to a $250,000 fine and/or including deportation. As all Americans are painfully aware, Dulles International Airport, just miles from where we are today, was one of the airports from which terrorists boarded airplanes that were crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the field in Pennsylvania on September 11th. Our response has been to weave a web of terrorism prevention that brings together all agencies of justice at every level of government. Let me be clear. There will be zero tolerance of security breaches at our nation's airports. We have as well asked the American people to take on new responsibilities and to endure inconveniences in order to help us prevent terrorism in our nation's airports. Today's arrests and indictments are an acknowledgement that the responsibility for airport security does not fall on air passengers alone. The American people are being asked to put up with long lines and intrusive searches. Americans deserve the confidence of knowing that the individuals working in our airports are worthy of our trust. There are many individuals and agencies to thank for the success of this investigation, and of course I begin with U.S. Attorney Paul McNulty of the Eastern District here in Virginia. In this, as well as so many other of our anti-terrorism investigations and prosecutions, Paul and his team have conducted themselves with an exemplary kind of excellence and professionalism and dedication. Also essential to the success of this operation were officials from a number of other local and state, as well as federal agencies. I want to thank the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Transportation, Social Security Administration, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the U.S. Customs Service, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Virginia State Police, the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Police, and the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. The contribution and cooperation of these agencies was the heart and soul of this investigation and is the linchpin of all of our efforts to protect terrorism. We work best when we work together. I thank each of these organizations for helping to make our airports safer and our citizens more secure. They are a tribute to law enforcement, to the nation, and to the ideal of freedom defended through law, to which we all aspire. Today's arrests are part of an ongoing effort to ensure that airport security is taken seriously by the airports and the employers that serve the nation's air travelers. All Americans have responsibilities. Only some Americans are granted the faith and trust of the flying public and an opportunity to work in these positions of trust. The Department of Justice is determined to see that this trust is earned and is deserved in all of our nation's airports. And now I'm pleased to invite U.S. Attorney from the Eastern District of Virginia, Paul McNulty, back to the microphone for his remarks. Paul.
Thank you, Attorney General Ashcroft, for being with us here today in Alexandria, Virginia, and for your continued support and leadership. As General Ashcroft has so eloquently stated, security at America's airports is a top priority. Here in Northern Virginia, we are painfully aware of the potential threats to air travel. 5 hijackers boarded American Airlines Flight 77 at Dulles Airport, resulting in the death of 189 innocent people. And Reagan National was incapacitated for a substantial period of time following the attacks of September 11th. That is why we formed this task force 5 months ago. Our goal was to identify as many individuals as possible who presented a risk to airport security and consequently to the traveling public. When we began this investigation, we didn't know where it would take us. We were somewhat alarmed by the large number of people who lied on their applications for security badges. Holding these individuals accountable for their false statements has required an enormous organizational and operational effort. Now, with regard to the impact of this effort on airport operations, even though we have made over 90 arrests today, the total number of employees at the 2 airports exceeds 20,000 people. The places of employment for those arrested is spread out over more than 60 different employers. Thus, passenger services have not been disrupted. I especially want to acknowledge the tremendous work of the attorneys and paralegals and secretaries in my office. Dozens of Eastern District of Virginia employees are involved in this operation. In particular, John Morton has been the lead attorney in this effort. First Assistant United States Attorney Ken Melson and attorneys Spence Pryor and Ron Walutis have also played critical roles. I can report to you now that because of this operation, Northern Virginia's 2 major airports are safer places for both the traveling public and the employees who work there. And I would like now to introduce John McGaugh, the Undersecretary of Transportation for Security, to say a few words. Mr. McGaugh.
Well, as most of you are aware, shortly after 9/11, the Congress passed the Transportation Aviation Security Act, and as a result, Transportation Security Administration was founded. And since that period of time, we have been working on the multifaceted problems of security at airports, whether it's the back gate, whether it's the ramp, whether it's the aircraft as it's being serviced, whether it's out in front in the public area. And of course, you don't do that without the kind of teamwork that is here represented today. And so I know that has been talked about by the United States Attorney and also the Attorney General, so I'll move on to a few other things. Background checks, completed background checks, accurate background checks are vital for employees who are in these critical areas at these airports. Standardizing, and that's one of the things that we're dwelling on heavily right now. Standardizing the background check process on all employees that have access to these restricted areas is one of the important parts of our early tasks. The work of the men and women of this task force have made the need for these kinds of security operations and these kind of changes to where we're standardizing these background examinations have been obvious by this case and these arrests. TSA will ensure as we move forward that access to secure areas will only be granted to those folks who are thoroughly checked, meet established background criteria, and need to be there. The need to be there is extremely important. Having recognized early on the importance of thorough background checks, TSA established a number of months ago a personnel security section to conduct criminal background checks and investigations on all TSA employees that we are hiring every day to work at our airports throughout the country. TSA is also deploying its federal security directors to lead our security efforts at every airport, of course in cooperation with the airport managers, the airport operators, the law enforcement personnel, to work with them to make sure that some of these weaknesses are taken care of. In fact, all weaknesses are identified and taken care of. These directors are working with not only the airlines, but the airports, the vendors, those who have to make a living sometimes behind these checkpoints or beyond these checkpoints, and employees who require access to these secure areas. In addition, we will be conducting physical security reviews for all airports to include perimeter security and tighten further the access controls. These actions and many others will improve security and ensure the integrity of our nation's airports. TSA will continue to work with our regulatory, our security, our airport, and our law enforcement partners to comply with the law, and we will not allow or not permit people to work in our airports that are employed under false pretenses. Thank you.
I'd be happy now to take some questions.
Could you give us some of the examples of the criminal records that were falsified? I know some of the cases in the past had been egregious. And in this example, is it true that one of the people had been actually deported and was working as an airport worker?
Right. As you see from the chart, the numbers break down into several different kinds of categories in terms of the charges that we have made here. The immigration fraud category would include those who have re-entered after deportation, or those who are absconders. They are subject to deportation and a civil order has been issued for their deportation, and they are being charged with various violations of immigration fraud. Now, as far as the criminal history records are concerned, there is a range of different criminal convictions for these individuals. It's about 30 individuals. You can see the total's 27. That number is slightly changing as we go through these cases, but I think right now we're looking at somewhere about 30. And we have a total of 15 felonies. Those felonies have include sexual assault, drug charges, malicious woundings, and we also have within those criminal charges another 14 or so that are misdemeanors, and the misdemeanors involve drug and firearms offenses, as well as some other assault-type charges. Terry.
What kind of sanctions can be brought against the employers of these individuals? And are you satisfied that you have the rules, the regulations, and the laws that you need to get at the employers who obviously haven't been doing their job in screening these individuals?
Well, one of the things we want to do when this is all finished, and this process is going to have to work itself out over the next several weeks as we dispose of these cases, is to sit down and talk to the airport authorities and help them to make whatever changes are appropriate as a result of the things we've learned from our task force activities. I think, obviously, a number of things are in order. I'd be happy to defer to Mr. McGaugh, or Attorney General, on that point.
The way it's working best around the country is to have the airport authority, the airport manager, that unit coordinate all of the background examinations, and that the background examinations are completed and verified prior to personnel coming on employment. What happens sometimes is that they're already employed before the background checks get finished. There's 2 or 3 airports in the country. Los Angeles is one. The Los Angeles International Airport has a separate building with a number of airport personnel, a number of law enforcement personnel, and everyone who is employed at that airport comes through this screening process. Fingerprint, photographs, background checks, interviews prior to being hired. So this is what we're going to be looking at with these entities, TSA will be looking at, is to try to get consistency all across the country and better coordinated with each individual airport and have somebody at that airport in charge of the overall operation.
But could action be taken against contractors or others who
well, you'd have to...
failures of this kind?
And see, I don't think this is anything intentional. I think it's a matter of the process that we have to straighten out. And that's what I'm talking about, and that's what all of us are talking about at these airports, to get the process changed so that it is consistent, it is standardized. Everybody goes through the same process, from the airport manager to the brand new hire coming on board. And identification that restricts people to certain areas. If you don't need access to the entire airport, then then that pass should not be issued. And also, once you issue it, then it has to be updated every couple of months to make sure that a crime has not been committed or something else has occurred. In fact, even shorter than every couple of months. Plus, you have to enforce it. There should be people, and we're going to be working with airports, TSA personnel and others, that will be checking credentials. Does this person belong here? Is this the right credential for this particular area? Is it a valid credential? Is it a counterfeited credential? And see, that's another thing that we have to be very careful of, is that the credentials have to have security features, and some do not have very many good ones.
I need to excuse myself. Let me just take this opportunity to thank again this coordinated effort by local, state, federal officials to initiate an undertaking which will be reflected in the way in which we pursue the potential for breach security around America. In particular, Paul McNulty, I thank you for your leadership here. Together with these other outstanding organizations at state and local levels and other federal organizations over the last 5 months now, you have done significant work to provide an enhanced security for the traveling public. And that will be our continuing mission and operation. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry.
Were any of these 94 people that you've arrested, have they been tied in any way to the September 11 attack? Or have they been connected or tied to any terrorist group or any known terrorists?
We have no evidence at this point of any connection to any of these individuals to a terrorist organization or to the September 11th crimes. However, we will continue to look at every individual who's arrested. The investigation will be ongoing, and we'll compare these individuals to any lists that we have, and we'll keep our eyes open. But at this point, we have no evidence of that. Brooke?
Who should have been checking these people's backgrounds? Was it the employers? Was it the airports?
Well, as I understand the process, and Mr. McGaugh may want to explain it in more detail.
Not the new one, but the old one. Who's
The old process. Do you want to explain that process?
It really is a mixed bag, and that's why Transportation Inspector General Kenneth Meade got involved months ago. He realized that the different airports around the country were, in some cases, it's almost like the checkpoints. The checkpoints that we've taken over now by the federal government were done by the airlines, and the airlines has a lot of other business to do. So in the case here, airlines are doing some of their background investigations. Others are been done by the airport, but it hasn't been one consistent package. And that's what we have to have. It's like anything else. It's like a strainer. You pour water into it, and it has leaks in it. That's kind of the way this system has been throughout the country, and we're moving to close those gaps.
Is this kind of investigation being done at other airports around the country?
Well, it's my understanding it is. I can't give you much information on that because each U.S. attorney has taken the initiative, and a number already have, and it's my understanding that others will be soon. So I think you should
elaborate at least to the extent that investigations are taking place at other airports that were used for the September 11th attack.
I can't confirm that. I don't know the answer to that. Jim, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Could you give us a sense of what kind of jobs these people were doing?
Yes, it's a wide range of things, and the number of employers involves at least 60 employers, as I mentioned in my statement, and the services at Reagan National involve custodial services, food service. There are a number of individuals who are involved in general maintenance and cleaning, not necessarily airplane maintenance. There are at Dulles a number of individuals who work in construction because, as you know, any of you who've flown in and out of Dulles, it's constantly under construction, and there are a lot of people who are employed by the construction industry out there. But the range of services is as broad as everything you would observe at the airport.
Was the potential there, pretty significant for I mean, I don't know what kind of things we could be talking about, smuggling weapons onto an aircraft or what have you. I mean, these people have access to aircraft.
Well, we've identified at least one person at each airport who was a baggage screener. In addition, we've identified a few people who worked on operations that involved airplane maintenance and cargo. Now, it's important to understand two things. First of all, by having the badge, you have access to nearly everything in the airport. There are only a couple places in the airport where you can't get to with the badge that we're primarily talking about in this operation. That would be a very restricted area that Customs Service has control of, and some of the people that are charged are actually people who falsified information to get their customs sticker on their security badge. And another is a very small area of airport operations, like air traffic control and so forth. But everywhere else, all around the airplanes and so forth, there's access with this badge. So the point here is that with this kind of security badge identification, anyone could get to those places. And depending upon what their motivation would be, and given the increased security checks that are going on right now, there may need to be more, or there may be motivation to have more creative ways of getting to airplanes. All of these individuals present a risk. We don't have information as to exactly what risks have occurred. We just know that the potential for harm is there.
I had two questions. One is, were any of these 94 or so people hired after September 11th? And then a question for the INS, Mr. Lewis, you can address this, is how is it that there are 21 deportable aliens working at the two airports? Why wasn't the INS on top of that prior to this moment?
Well, I'll let Mr. Lewis address that second question. On the first question, I don't have the information in front of me of when individuals were employed. My suspicion is that some will probably have been employed since September 11th, but I'm not sure if we have that information in the folders. We probably do, but we'll have to get you that number. I don't know if Warren Lewis wants to speak, but I will say before he comes up that remember, a number of these individuals who are in the immigration fraud category are people who perhaps were deported and snuck back in, and so the question of how did they get there is really the question of how do they ever get back in. Of course, we know that that's there's a wide variety of ways. And then as far as the absconders are concerned, those are individuals who were ordered to be deported, but as you know from the absconder initiative, that's a number of over 350,000 people, and so this might be, well, this would be a very tiny subset of that larger group.
Thank you. Actually, that subset, as Mr. McNulty is talking about, would involve individuals who may have been under proceedings and may have been released on a bond and would have gone to hearings, and they could have been ordered deported. And since they're out on bond, there are certain requirements for them to return to the office for deportation, so the bonds would have been breached. And as he indicated, there were categories of individuals who were deported and came back into the country.
Do you think it's an unfair criticism to look at the INS and question why it is that there are this amount of people working at the two airports that the INS and obviously other federal agencies were not aware of?
Well, from an employment standpoint, as you know, with the Immigration Reform and Control Act, employers are responsible to ensure that individuals are authorized for employment. A number of the individuals arrested today had counterfeit documents in their possession, so they met the requirements. To say it's an unfair criticism, I think that there are different procedures in place, and I'm sure that many of the employers are trying to utilize the process that's there to make sure that they comply with the regulations. It's a vast number of individuals. There are more than 300,000 individuals in the absconder program, and offices are just not properly staffed to adjust that type of quantity of individuals.
By the way, before I take another question, let me just point something out that maybe you're going to ask me about. The numbers on the right-hand column, the total, exceeds the number of arrests that we've made today. And that's because these are the numbers of individuals we expect to be arresting over the course of the day. The operation is still ongoing, and it may continue beyond today at least in the sense of some individuals who are not at the airport and may need to be arrested in other locations. But we, in a sense, kind of have this as our universe of individuals who we are seeking to arrest today, and the process of making those arrests is ongoing. That's why right now it stands at just under 100.
Some of them have committed more than one of these?
No, this chart reflects really the breakdown of the charges. So, correct. This is not. It does not overlap. There may be one or two, but I don't. And we've done our best to try to eliminate the overlap here. Yes.
Well, that does lead. That was my question,
Yeah.
but it leads me to something else.
Sure.
How do you move into processing a group this large?
Well, that's a great question, and it's been a very challenging process to put together an operation that can process this many people. We've had fantastic cooperation from the various offices within the courts and the U.S. Marshals Service to make this possible. And essentially what we are doing is beginning today a process that will involve individuals making an appearance by the end of the day, perhaps into tomorrow. And many of those people will be detained. They'll be detained, of course, because they are subject to deportation, or perhaps there is some other justification for detention. Those who are being detained will then be arraigned early next week, and detention hearings will also be held for them next week. Others who are released will be arraigned in the first 2 weeks of May. So what we'll do is we will involve a large number of assistant United States attorneys in this office to handle these cases. We will seek the cooperation of the defense bar, and we will work with the judges to get these cases through our system.
Those appearances today, are they happening here, or are they at a facility offsite?
No, they'll be in this courthouse, yes.
Were all these people arrested today?
Correct.
So, but clearly over the last 5 weeks, you've identified that some of these people were in their positions wrongly.
Right.
So we just left them in their positions?
Well, in order to make sure that we conducted this operation in a way that would be effective so that we could actually apprehend the people that need to be apprehended, we needed to organize ourselves to get them, at least get as many of them as possible at one time. So to do that took a great deal of planning. I can't give you all the details because some of that is sort of our operational work, but I can tell you that the delay was really based on two things. First, identifying these individuals. And when you said in your question, well, they've been identified maybe 5 weeks ago, the answer is no. We've been working on identifying these people up until the last minute. It's a very tedious process to get the case files from INS and from other sources, to go through them, to figure out if they are individuals who've committed a crime, and then to prepare the information, also to get indictments. And those arrested today, by the way, have been indicted. They were indicted last week. And then, once we got that done, we had to make sure that we could then maximize the arrest opportunity. So that's why we brought this along as fast as we could.
But were steps taken to ensure that during the period with which you identified someone as having access inappropriately, and between today's arrest, that they didn't do anything?
No, those steps were not taken, because for us to do that would probably have compromised. It may have been some way to pull off an operation like that, but for the most part, it might have compromised the surprise and the ability to arrest as many people as possible. Brooke?
Are all these folks immigrants? You mentioned INS. Are some of these U.S. citizens who have
Oh, yes. No. Substantial number of these individuals are U.S. citizens.
I call for a final question.
Can I ask you about Oregon Bright? Were any of the people arrested today employees of Oregon Bright? And from what I understand, they are still operating in 5 major airports. Are there going to be any consequences for them? Why are they still in business?
Well, I can't speak to all of that, although Director McGaw might be able to do that. All I can say to you is this. I keep calling you director because I remember you from that world. But we did arrest 2 Oregon Bright employees, one at Reagan National, one at Dulles. Both of them were baggage screeners. One was arrested for a falsifying criminal history record. The other, I don't think I have the criminal history record in front of me at the moment. and the other was a false Social Security number case. As for the question of what's happening at the other airports, Undersecretary.
The airports that you talk about, the 4 or 5 airports that still have Argan-Bright employees there and the Argan-Bright company, are being eliminated virtually every day. Numbers are changed over. We expect within the next 2 weeks that there will not be any Argan-Bright contracts in any of the airports in this country. It will take us longer to train the full federal force. But where Argan-Bright is today, as well as where Globe and the other companies are, we have federal personnel, TSA personnel there, overseeing the checkpoints, making sure that the checkpoints are being run properly. If they find violations or inconsistencies in security, they're pulling them aside, and we're doing some retraining. And at the same time, about 400 people a week are being hired as new federal security screeners, and that will get up to about 1,000 a month within the next few weeks.
Let me just conclude by saying thanks again to the staff of this office who have worked so hard on this, and the people who will be working on this, the Assistant United States Attorneys and the paralegals and the secretaries in the weeks to come. It's been a tremendous effort on top of everything else that we are doing in this office, and it's just another reflection of the great dedication of the staff of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District. I also want to thank, again, these organizations that are represented by the gentleman behind me. Hundreds of individuals worked to make this successful, and these law enforcement organizations gave very generously of their time, working weekends and getting in place very, very early this morning and being pulled off of other things in order to make this happen. And it was a true collaboration, and I want to thank you all for that work. Thank you very much. Get us some other time.